Had she ever mentioned psychosis to you before?
No, I didn't know what psychosis was until after this happened.
Did she
I didn't
ever
know what psychosis was until after this happened. That is Patrick Clancy, the state's first witness, testifying about the week after his 3 children were killed. The prosecution used that line to make him look like a man who didn't see the warning signs. But in Massachusetts, that line may be the most dangerous weapon the state has. Picture a fire investigator pointing at a cracked window in a burned house, while the gas line behind the wall still leaks. That is what blaming Patrick Clancy does. It feels like accountability. It actually ignites the prosecution's only path to murder. Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to Courtroom Verdict Vault. Because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence.
Everybody seems to have an opinion about Lindsay's ex-husband, Patrick Clancy. Could he have done more? Was there trouble in the relationship? But what's interesting is I have a defense attorney and criminologist on the show today who's going to explain that if any of that was to come out into court, it would actually derail Lindsay's postpartum psychosis defense. So it would actually be very, very bad if any of those issues, if they even really are issues, were to come out in court for Lindsay Clancy, which I'll explain why.
The public question has shifted. Why did he leave her alone?
So whether it's totally fair or not, some of the conversations have now shifted towards Patrick. Why did he leave Lindsay alone with the children when he knew how much she was struggling? Could he have done more to get her help? Or should he have been keeping a better eye on her? Did he understand postpartum mental illness? Was he struggling too? And again, just there's no way to get around the fact that Patrick suffered an unimaginable loss in this tragedy too, and is having to relive the worst day of his life and live every day with what happened. I mean, imagine what that must be like. He has said he forgives Lindsay despite all of this, though the two are now divorced. To me, the question is not whether Patrick Clancy was a perfect husband, but whether evidence of problems in the marriage, if there were problems, would actually
Could he have done
help
more? Those questions sound sympathetic to Lindsay Clancy. Legally, they are not. Motive kills the insanity defense. That is not a slogan. It is the mechanics of this trial. Lindsay Clancy's defense rests on postpartum psychosis, the claim that her mind was not her own on January 24, 2023. If the jury believes she acted out of rage or resentment toward her husband, the psychosis disappears, the act becomes deliberate. The path to conviction opens.
to replay some of the testimony from the state's first witness, the person who spent more time with Lindsay than probably anyone else, her husband, Patrick. Now remember, the state is arguing that Lindsay murdered her 3 kids deliberately and intentionally. That is what prosecutors are saying. They say that while yes, she had mental health issues, that she was not experiencing psychosis. Obviously, her defense attorney says that's not true, that it was postpartum psychosis, that Lindsay sought help, that she was overprescribed medication, and that she was not in her right mind when all of this happened. We learned her postpartum struggles started way before January 2023, way before the January 2023 tragedy.
did she seek treatment or tell you she sought treatment after Dawson's birth?
Yeah, she got a therapist for a short period of time, but it didn't last very long.
And when she told you that she was having intrusive thoughts, did you ask her what they were?
Yeah.
And what was her response?
She described thoughts of hurting the kids or them having some sort of ailment.
But Patrick says Lindsay's mental health got worse after the birth of their 3rd child, Kaylin. She was having trouble with the idea of going to work. She sought psychiatric treatment. She went to the hospital, and she also sought care from postpartum specialists.
Here is the irony. Patrick Clancy is being blamed in public as a way to explain the unexplainable. But if that blame reaches the jury as evidence of marital trouble, it hands the prosecution the one thing it cannot manufacture: a reason. A woman pushed to the edge by a failing marriage is not lost in psychosis. She has a target.
And all sorts of medications. There's been all sorts of medications that they've talked about. Patrick says on the day of the murders, Lindsay never said the kids were in danger, never said that she needed help or was overwhelmed. And when Lindsay asked him to go run an errand, obviously that is when the worst thing imaginable happened. Patrick actually talked to Lindsay on the phone. About a week later, she called him from the hospital. Imagine what that must have been like. Listen to this.
What did the defendant say at that time about what had happened with the children?
She didn't talk about our kids. She talked about what she went through.
And what did she say about what she went through?
She said she heard a man's voice telling her that if she didn't do it now, she would lose her chance or something like that.
And did she also tell you that she had had a moment of psychosis?
I don't recall.
Did she mention the children at all during that call?
I don't think so.
Look at the state's burden. Massachusetts is one of the few jurisdictions where the prosecution must prove she was not insane beyond a reasonable doubt. Her lawyers do not have to prove psychosis. The Commonwealth has to disprove
get
it.
a verdict in the end.
What did you say it's called in Massachusetts, like insanity? What do they call it there? You said in the beginning.
We don't call it not guilty by reason of insanity in Massachusetts. It's called not criminally responsible. And Massachusetts is a little odd in a number of ways. For our listeners and viewers, every state has its own rule of law with regard to the insanity defense. Some states, like Texas, use the McNaughton rule, which is the harshest of all the insanity defenses and almost never successful. And the bulk of states have switched from that to what we call the model penal code or substantial capacity test. And that's what Massachusetts uses. It's not a black and white thing where you must be suffering under such a disease of the mind or defective reason so as to not know. McNaughton rule says you must know that what you're doing is wrong and that everyone else thinks it's wrong too. That the general society would condemn this as wrong and that you don't think society is wrong, you agree that it's wrong and you do it anyway. So people who don't know the difference between right and wrong are eligible for the insanity defense. With the substantial capacity test, the wording is softer. You're under a disease of the mind or a defective reason, so not to appreciate or understand the wrongfulness of your act. So in other words, whereas McNaughton rule is very black and white and dichotomous, it's a yes, no question. With substantial capacity, think of it as looking at your ability to reason as a jar that is half full, half empty gradations. And that your ability to understand in that moment when you commit the alleged crime, if it is a diminished capacity, which it would be if she were in the throes of a postpartum psychosis episode, her ability to reason drains like water out of a jug that has a hole in it. Doesn't mean it can't come back later, which is how we end up with temporary insanity. But in that moment, did you not appreciate the wrongfulness of your acts? And I think that this will really work for Lindsay Clancy, because in that moment, she clearly was thinking, and she said later, she heard a man's voice telling her that if she didn't do it then at that exact moment, that she would never have another chance. If you go with that as the truth, then she lacks substantial capacity to understand the wrongfulness of her acts. And it doesn't make it impossible for her mind to heal itself over time, perhaps with the right combination of drugs and care. She never had psychotherapy, just drugs thrown at her. I think we would have had a completely different outcome if she had had a psychotherapist. But the bottom line, Brian, is that in Massachusetts, the burden for proving that she's not insane is on the prosecution. That's extremely rare. In almost every other state, the burden of proving insanity is on the defense. So basically, when Reddington posits the insanity defense, it is now Sprague, the prosecutor's job, to prove she's not insane. That's much harder. Last time we saw that was with John Hinckley, and we know how that turned out. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity for shooting President Reagan and James Brady and so on. So I think that because Massachusetts law, A, allows for substantial capacity, and B, puts the burden on the prosecution to prove not insanity, I think Lindsay Clancy has a very strong chance of prevailing on this not criminally responsible
So the
defense.
state needs a story. And the story it needs is not mental illness.
Not at that
It is
time.
motive.
Do you think there could be secrets though that we don't know about with Patrick?
I listen, you never know what happens behind closed doors or what secrets people hold. And the bottom line is that it's very tempting and human nature on behalf of all of the cyber sleuths to want to look at the theory that maybe Patrick was having an affair. A lot has been made about his trip to New York. And of course, he has since remarried a woman in New York, a doctor who specializes in fertility treatments. And there's even the rumor that he's had a child. I haven't heard that confirmed, but it wouldn't surprise me. So we are like, oh, that's really quick. Why isn't he grieving for years and years and years about his children? It is not surprising that this man who suffered perhaps the worst tragedy that a father can come home and discover has wanted to find solace in a new relationship, has wanted to put this behind him, has wanted to remarry and perhaps have a new family. Rusty Yates did the exact same thing after Andrea. And who are we to say it's too quick or should have taken longer to grieve? We are all Monday morning quarterbacking, but let's get really to the meat of your question. If he was having an affair and Lindsay discovered that, let's go with the hypothetical that people are positing as part of the conspiracy theory, and she killed the children as retaliation, as payback to Patrick for that affair. Number one, I can't rule out that she had discovered something like that and just never told anybody. So it's possible. But if she came public with that and said, oh, I was down in the basement, I was hacking into his email, I found all these, horrible emails between him and some woman in New York, again, hypothetically, she would never, ever, ever want anyone to know that because that would establish a motive, when we talk about the women who kill their children to get back at their exes or to make their husbands suffer. That would destroy her insanity defense. So if it's true, she's never going to admit that she knew it, and he's never going to admit that it was happening behind her back and could be an impetus for the killing of the children and the jumping out the window. So I truly believe that if it is possible, it is a truth we will never, ever, ever know. Because for all the right reasons, he doesn't want people to know, because he can't handle the guilt if that was the impetus. And she doesn't want anybody to know that she discovered it because that would destroy her insanity defense. But I'm going to tell you, as a criminologist and a lawyer, I truly don't think that both of them could keep that secret so carefully. I think it would have come to the surface by now by people who knew about the affair, if it were true. So I'm erring on the side of just in
Motive kills the insanity defense. Now look at the evidence.
This is still supposed to go on for a couple more weeks. What do you think we'll see from the defense side?
Well, we've got a defense attorney in Reddington. He is a pit bull.
Yeah.
He is in his 70s. He's tried, I think, hundreds of cases, and he's really good at what he does. I have never seen anyone like such a firebrand on cross. I mean, yes, he's in the top 10, I would argue. And they were very smart to get him. He's collected his evidence, and he has already made a very strong move with this civil case that's going on. He has all of that information that was developed in the civil case about the medications that she was on. I mean, we've already had these amazing moments where he's like, yeah, the police came in and they took her meds, and they keep saying they have 7 meds. Then I went there with Patrick. I found all kinds of other meds that the police didn't find. And he literally presents the nightstand drawer full of medications. And we now have a count going from 7 to 14 medications. I mean, this is really compelling. And of course, we haven't heard all the evidence, but I am completely convinced just by what I've read so far in the civil suit that she was over medicated, that the right hand didn't know what the left was doing with regard to all of her health care providers. They just go to the records, but they aren't asking her questions. Like, okay, we may have taken you off of Seroquel. How is the Klonopin working? Where's your Seroquel? Did you bring the bottle with you? Because I would really like to do a pill count and make sure you don't have any extras at home, because you shouldn't be taking these two things together. I mean, did they ever have these conversations with her? Or what scares me the most is they're like, oh, you're a nurse. You know what you're doing, without any credence to the fact that she is an incredibly mentally ill new mother. Maybe they trumped that with her nursing background status, didn't ask her the right questions, or just assumed that because she was a healthcare provider herself, she would know what to do. But the fact that her pill bottles were in the vehicle belonging to Patrick because he was taking them to her healthcare provider. You know how your doctor says, bring all your meds with you because they want to know what you're taking, and you can't remember everything. And there were some in the nightstand drawer, some in his car, some around the house. I mean, this woman was drowning in drugs in just the 3 or 4 months before this horrible incident happened. And I truly think she was over medicated, that there were contraindications between some of these drugs, that no one was making sure that she was titrated off the drugs that she was taking. There's a lot of very specific care that goes with taking these mental health drugs, both the antidepressants and the mood stabilizers, and of course the anti-anxiety medications. You take too many of them at once, or you're not off of the old one when you start the new one. This can happen. So to answer your question, I think all of this is going to be brought up. It will be a battle of the experts, but I think this defense attorney is going to bring on experts that are just going to completely hammer home the fact that Lindsay Clancy was not of this world when she killed her children. She was in a psychotic state caused not only by the postpartum psychosis, but perhaps aggravated by a cocktail of drugs that she either wasn't in control of her doses or was making mistakes on how she took them.
Do you think we could see a hung jury at the end? Because there are some people, at least that even that I know that I've just been chatting about the case with, some people are very black and white on this issue. I mean, they do not have sympathy for Lindsay Clancy because she killed her 3 kids. They don't care about the mental illness component. And it's just like, this is awful and she's got to pay. I mean, if there's a couple of those or even one of those on the jury, I think that could happen, don't you?
I absolutely do think it would happen, but for exactly the reasons you say, because people are operating with emotions instead of the rule of law, instead of logic, instead of going through the evidence. We see that happen all the time. That's why we always say that cases are won or lost in jury selection. And in this particular case, we have these 12 women and 6 men, okay? And I've done a lot of background research on Andrea Yates' second jury in her second trial, the one that found her not guilty by reason of insanity. And I truly believe that they had a very good jury on that second trial, and which is the reason that she was found not guilty by reason of insanity. The key was that they specifically chose women who, even if they were mothers, were older mothers, mature mothers, maybe in their 50s or 60s, not the mothers of young children. And they went for very highly educated people. I think 2 of the women had psychology degrees on the Andrea Yates trial. It just shows, So what will we get with this jury? We don't know who the alternates are going to be until the very end, right? And then they decide who's going to deliberate and who's going to be an alternate. They all have to listen with equally open ears through the whole trial, not knowing whether they will be on the deliberation team or not. In theory, we could get 12 women in this jury trial. And I think that would be terrible for the defense, because if there are any young mothers there.
Police seized 7 medications. The defense later produced 14. Pill bottles were in the nightstand in the house in Patrick's car. That is not a routine prescription. That is a woman drowning in pharmacology. But the medication evidence only matters if the jury believes her brain was broken. The moment the trial becomes about her marriage, the medications become noise. The stakes are not just legal. They are a clock. If Lindsay Clancy is found not criminally responsible, she does not receive a prison sentence. She is committed to a psychiatric facility until a panel decides she is no longer dangerous. That can be years or it can be weeks. There is no minimum. There is no maximum. There is only a door. And the only question with real consequence is this: how fast does a not criminally responsible verdict become a release date? That is the thriller hidden inside this courtroom. The public wants someone to pay.
And, they're questioning if he could have done more.
I think hindsight being 2020, he wishes he could have done more. But I also think that Patrick is just low-hanging fruit for us to blame, because if we are persuaded by the defense's arguments that she really was in a psychotic state with postpartum psychosis, and that her doctors weren't spending enough time with her and we're just over medicating her. If we dare buy into that theory that she is truly not guilty by reason of insanity or not criminally responsible, as they say in Massachusetts, then we have this deep need for someone to be responsible for someone to pay. And yeah, the doctors are getting it on that end with the civil suit, but the actual tragedy, who was there?
Patrick Clancy is the easiest target, but every accusation aimed at him reloads the prosecution's case. If the jury hears that Lindsay discovered an affair, or that she was ignored, or that she wanted to hurt him, the defense does not just weaken, it dies.
Correct. And, you can have this kind of like sealed fate between people who suffer from guilt. I don't want to move this totally into like the Jean Bonnet realm, but there are many people who think that John and Patsy were equally responsible for their daughter's death, and both have something on the other. And so it was a secret that we'll never know and went to death with Patsy. But the whole point is the lawyer may or may not know about something that would have been the impetus for this, but it would never be something that they wanted to come out, because right now, her 3 years of begging for help, for psychiatric help, for reporting and going to doctors for her bipolar. She had these manic episodes, lost all this weight, went on these exercise kicks, was running marathons. I mean, she was the poster child for bipolar. And then when you have postpartum psychosis on top of bipolar, you can get a result just like we've seen in the death of these children. But if the affair happened and it has nothing to do with her psychosis, it would be the perfect slam dunk for this prosecutor who's going after her like a tiger to say, oh, this is just, a scorned woman. This is just a woman who's getting even. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. If she knew that Patrick had an affair or was seeing somebody on the side, she killed the children just to make him suffer. I don't buy it, but if that came to the surface, if that were a Perry Mason moment in this trial and that was introduced, this would slide everything towards the prosecution's argument.
Just motive kills the insanity defense. This is not a demand to excuse Patrick Clancy. It is a warning about forensic logic. The state called him first for a reason. They are not trying to convict Patrick. They are trying to convict
Lindsay. Then we want to go to plan B, and Patrick is right there. I haven't seen or heard anything that makes him blameworthy. You have to understand, this is a man who worked full time. He had complete faith in his wife, who was a nurse, that she knew what was going on with herself, and that she would probably alert him. He had never heard of psychosis before. We have to keep that in mind. He's not a healthcare practitioner. He is a man who loves his wife, loves his children, is extremely busy, is trying to be the man who works full time while supporting his wife and taking care of these kids. And at the same time, he doesn't have any medical knowledge that would actually illuminate the situation. When she went to that inpatient care and was released after just a day or two, because she didn't have a very specific plan for suicide, he's trusting the doctors. And I guess that's how I want to leave it, Brian. I mean, before we blame Patrick, he's following everything that the medical practitioners in his life are telling him. That includes his wife, Lindsay, but also the medley of doctors who were just over-medicating her and right-handed.
In a postpartum psychosis defense, the marriage is the only motive that can beat the medical records. Here is your assignment. Go to the Plymouth County Superior Court records. Pull the prosecution's exhibit log from the first week of testimony. Read the medication list yourself. Then answer one question in the comments after seeing 14 medications, 3 dead children, and a husband who did not know what psychosis was. Do you see a murder or do you see a system failure? Like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications for Courtroom Verdict Vault so you do not miss the next court filing.